Oh, being recorded. We're distributed across a lot of different departments around the university, all over the place. So my mentors were actually in the Department of Linguistics and Department of Hearing and Speech Sciences. So Siobhan and I overlapped for a year, which was delightful. My training is in linguistics and psychology. I've sort of bounced all over the place. And then I came to Maryland in part because it has this great language research community, this great sort of community-minded spirit and things like that. Starting my PhD, I sort of wanted to go for the academic route. I'm currently an assistant professor at the University at Buffalo in our speech pathology department here. So I knew that's sort of the direction I wanted to head in. And so during my PhD, I sort of spent my time working with my mentors to try to make that happen. So doing research, publishing papers, all the sort of academic trajectory. I sort of went through my PhD, I was meeting with my advisors pretty much every week, talking through research or other aspects of life as a grad student. Over time, both my advisors also became chairs of their respective departments. So that was also very weird, and meant that they, I think, enjoyed the time with me as an oasis away from all of their admin nonsense they had to take care of. That said, as we got into my fourth year, in my program, usually you have a dissertation proposal that you have to do around your fourth year before you start working on your dissertation projects themselves. So I completed that around in the fall of my fourth year. In the fall, I guess it would have been 2015 or so, is when I did that. And after that point, I started talking with my advisors with some detail about what it is that I should be doing next. What should I be going to next? What should I be doing next? Now, I did apply for a handful of tenure track jobs during my fourth and fifth years at places where I was like, if I were to pick anywhere, I would love to have this job. It seems like a great fit for me. Like, I would be upset if I didn't apply for them. But I knew realistically the main focus was sort of on the postdoc route, on sort of slotting in there. Because I'm between a lot of different fields and a lot of different departments, they each have their own norms about that. So psych almost requires postdocs. Linguistics are less common, but are growing more common. Speech pathology, they're not very common at all, but we sort of have a relative undersupply of faculty and academics in the field in the first place. So even though they're not that common, it's also not unheard of to get a tenure track job out of your PhD. But that said, like, there were some skills I wanted to pick up. There was interesting things I wanted to know. And I knew that from talking to my advisors. At Maryland, I was hoping to get more of an interest in neuroimaging and things like that. I didn't really have too much of a chance to do that. So that's something I wanted to pick up, for example, in my postdoc. So I tend to be a very organized person. Anyone who knows me knows I love Excel spreadsheets full of like ridiculously conditional formatted tables and things like that. So of course, the first thing I had to do was create an Excel spreadsheet full of possible mentors. And the idea was, using folks I had met at conferences, folks whose papers I had read, scrolling through some of the best departments I knew of in the country for the sort of things I did. I sort of added each of these, different individuals on the table. And I said, okay, how many grants have they won lately? How many publications do they have? Do they have postdocs? Do they have grad students? And how many of each? And I sort of tried to make a table to try to see, which of these are the strongest candidates for me. And over time, then I sort of reflected on what my interests were and how they'd fit with them. One specific thing I did, I was looking back at this just now. I made like paragraphs where I described grants I would write with each person if I were to make a postdoc grant, like F32 in the NIH and NRSA, or there's an NSF postdoc grant. And then I reached out to, I ended up ranking one person highest at the University of Connecticut, Emily Myers, and I reached out to her. And the way I sort of phrased that email is, hey, I'm considering postdoc options. I was wondering if you wanted to write a grant together. And we had a Skype session where we sort of chatted through different ideas for grants, and we came up with a pretty cool idea. So we decided at that point, let's work together, let's make this happen. And so that fall, we actually wrote both an NIH and an NSF postdoc grant together. The NIH grant didn't end up getting discussed. We resubmitted it, it didn't get discussed, but that NSF grant ended up getting funded on that first submission, which was really great. So I knew sort of even before I started writing my dissertation in earnest, she had said, hey, I have money for a postdoc, even if we don't get these grants. But then on top of that, once I won that grant, then it was great. And it made my dissertation life a little bit easier to know what was happening next. In the postdoc, postdocs are a really great time in academic life in a lot of ways. So you get lots of experience to do research, to focus on that, and really ask some interesting questions. And it's a really great experience, and we can talk more about that if you're curious. But I think in general, the steps that got me to that point, I had met Emily before. She gave a talk at Maryland during my first year. She didn't really remember me when I emailed her, but we had folks in common. So that sort of general networking, I think, helped. As far as advice, though, one specific piece of advice I'd want you to take away as you're considering whether a postdoc's the right fit for you and where to go. For a lot of people, and for myself included, your postdoc falls at a weird time in your life. It's one where you might have a long-term partner, or you might have ideas, your parents are aging, things like that. And postdocs are inherently temporary. So at most points in your academic career, you are discouraged from thinking about that, right? You're discouraged and you're like, nope, you have to focus on where the job takes you and things like that. That is somewhat true with postdocs for sure. But also consider the fact that things are temporary, things might change, and this is a time in your life when you might want to start putting down roots somewhere. So if that's you, then consider that. If that's not you, then don't consider that. And of course, if you have a partner where you're considering making this move with, or things like that, make sure to talk carefully with them about that, because it's a temporary posting. You're only there for a little bit amount of time. So maybe you'll decide to be long distance the whole time you're there, or something like that. Or maybe you and your partner, that doesn't work for you. So that's one thing to keep in mind, because postdocs are a important key of your life in general, not just in academia. So that'd be my one tip.
Thanks, Chris. I should have mentioned before I got Chris started, if you think of questions as they're talking, please put them in the chat. We won't stop for them now, but we are going to come back to them. I know I already have a lot of questions after hearing from Chris. So our next panelist is Yun-Ting, and I will wave wildly when you have 1 minute left. I should have said that before, Chris. Okay, go ahead.
Right, thank you for inviting me to this panel. And I was a UMD postdoc for 2.5 years, from 2019 to 2021. I actually recently left not long ago. So what I do now is I am a scientist in the local biotech. So in the company, we do immuno-oncology study. So my expertise is in molecular biology and cell biology. So back in my PhD, I actually was doing plant biology and genetics study, but I have a lot of expertise in molecular biology. So the reason I went to Maryland for my postdoc, just like Chris said, postdoc is an interesting time, and then you do have to take care of your family or consider your family. So that's exactly why I came to Maryland, because my husband got a job at an FDA. So I know I want to find a job in this region. And so that's how I really started looking. And then at Maryland, as I was talking to my PhD advisor back in Texas, my PhD advisor just said, oh, there's just one PI you should work for, really, because she's awesome. She's just like an expert in the field and etc. So I just went on to the website and then see what she's doing. And then on the top of the website, there's a hiring ad. I was like, oh, I should just send her an email. And then one led to another. I joined the lab because she actually have funding, and then we have mutual interest. And so that was a pretty smooth transition. And I think other than that position, I actually only applied for one other position. So it was just kind of when chance is there, you gotta grab onto it kind of situation. So I stay in Maryland, and just exactly like Chris said, postdocs is an interesting time. And I knew in the beginning this will be a temporary thing because the funding cycle is two years, 3 years, and you just know when it ends, it ends, right? Unless your PI has additional pot of money for you. So in Maryland, I started to really seek out a lot of webinar or workshop and information. So Susan and Blessing actually are great helps. I couldn't thank them enough. So they provide so much information. And I actually went to probably almost all of the workshops they hosted because they are so helpful and they are all so nice. And if you go to one workshop, you might not feel that's the information, you might not trust the information, you might not believe the information, but when you just go multiple times, like you start wondering, like, is that true? Is that not true? Like, just because when we're kind of ingrained, like, okay, tenure track faculty job is the goal, right? A lot of old school thoughts like that. But as I was going to the workshop, and it was like that thought kind of starts shaking. So I'm not like Chris, I don't know what I want to do. So even at the end of my PhD, at the end of my postdoc, I don't know what I want to do. I have a general sense of what I want to do, but I don't know exactly what I want to do. I'm okay with anything. I know some things I don't want to do, but I'm okay with a lot of things. And that's why it's so hard to pin down just one specific position or one specific expertise. But I started to really explore a lot of options other than doing bench work. I started to explore a lot more like a science communication type of route because I think that's so important. For the past year, we know how important it is because there are so many misinformation out there. But anyways, so when the funding ended at Maryland, and I just left the lab because that's kind of a mutual stop. It's a good stop and ending point for me. But looking for a job during a pandemic is not fun. So I took some time to some break because I didn't take a break during my from my PhD to the postdoc. So I kind of enjoyed the break a little bit, just stay at home, just doom scrolling or whatever. But I started to casually submit for some job application and stuff. And I end up submitting the application to this company because as I was looking for the job ads, I was just thinking, okay, I can do this, I can do that. It's one of the few jobs I actually feel like I can do everything. That's kind of a rare situation, but we could talk about that. But it actually took me quite a while. So I left Maryland about in July, and I start my new role about February. So that's a big, like a half a year. So in this half a year, I actually explore a lot of choices, like including science communication. Like I said, I started to take on some freelance job and then do some writing here and there, and then really trying to bridge between general public and the scientist and trying to make some impact. But deep down in my mind, I feel like I still want to do the science. I really much enjoy the communication part, but I also really enjoy doing the science part. That's why I end up just applying for this position. So one thing I want to say about networking is you should really start early, because when you establish the relationship, you really shouldn't ask people for referral in the beginning. You should really establish the relationship first, and then if they know you, and they can start refer you to opportunity and stuff. So start early, whether it's for networking purpose or really just for understanding what the industry or what your position you want to go into. You may not have the expertise, but you might have time. If you start early, you might have time to establish that kind of expertise to make you go into the position you really want. So that will be it.
Great, thank you. You finished 12 seconds early, gold star. Okay, next up we have Setsuko Yokoyama. And again, I'll wave wildly at you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Setsuko. I graduated last year from UMD. I was in the English program, and I also did a certificate in digital studies in arts and humanities. And given I am not a US citizen and here on a student visa, and I was going to go on to this OPT visa, which is only 1 year visa. So I didn't have much option but to apply for temporary postdoc positions. So it was easy for me that I didn't need to do the tenure track applications. I just got the tenure track position. So my initial plan to use the OPT or like the postdoc year as like a transitional phase was really helpful for me. So I'd like to start with what I do now as a postdoc at Washington University in St. Louis, and then kind of backtrack what I did during my during my PhDs at Maryland. My teaching and research center around humanistic inquiry of digital technology. In concrete terms or in layperson's terms, I teach courses like a geopolitical map of the internet or data feminism. So I'm the ethics person on the AI team, things like that. In terms of the research, I'm writing a colonial history of data visualization, kind of connecting the dot of how speech to text technologies, something like Chris was kind of talking about in terms of speech pathology, and I tackle from a language diversity perspective. And for the institutional contribution at Washington University, I am a part of the prison education group. And this is an application of my dissertation where I theorized accessibility in archives. And I'm now working to make sure that students that are currently in the carceral systems can also have access to archives and use that as their part of their education experience. So that's what I do. Let me pull up my note here. During my PhD program, or when I was actually on the job market, what was really helpful was all the support that I got from my mentors and my seniors. And they really helped in terms of coaching how to navigate the job market, because there are so many unwritten rules and the norms that I was supposed to know, but I had no idea. And so I took upon the BGS at English, Dr. Garson Aviles, and my dissertation chair, Dr. Marthnell Smith, who really helped me with the mock interviews, mock job talks, whatnot, and kind of, doing the rewiring or like rewiring of my brain so that I could kind of pitch myself as a salesperson, like you need to give a quick and savvy takes on what you do. You really need to market yourself. And I was very uncomfortable doing it. Trained as a humanist. I was like, oh no, it's all about complexity and nuance. But I was going on and on with my interview Q&As. So my mentors really helped me to coach through the ways. So that I was very, very appreciative. Same goes to folks who came before me. So people who graduated before me, we had this kind of like a peer buddy network. And this is something you can, start as early in that you can keep showing up for your community of people. Academia at the end of the day is a network of people. And we always rely on it. And there's whisper networks, right? Like things that are not officially announced, but we need to know, how to negotiate salaries, things like that. So it's really the people who helped me through, and they helped me and they tell me to pay it forward. So that's part of the reason why I'm here today, so that I could also pass on to the advice that I received. In terms of the advice for preparing for your career, be it postdoc or something beyond postdoc in the long run. And depending on where you are in your program, I'd say be proactive for things that excite you. So during my PhD program, I was a project manager for open access archival projects, and another one as a PI. But I wrote to the directors even before I was admitted to the UMD program, just because I was really excited. So it looks like it always comes down to like writing the professional but love letter, you know, where I express all the excitement that I have for the project and how enthusiastic I am. And that's how I kind of had this kind of practical training. In addition to all the courseworks and all the writing, I had this digital project practicum under my belt. And people really enjoy you all talking about the things that excites you. And I think that would be a more sustainable or true to heart approach to navigating the 2020s, which we all know is quite difficult. But I would say stay true to yourself and let that be the guiding torch, because you'll never know. So you might as well be true to yourself. Okay, this is me.
Great, thanks. You finished 32 seconds early, so you even get an even golder star. So Kristin, that's the example you have to follow. Go ahead.
Yeah, tough acts to follow here. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristin Hook. I was a postdoc at the University of Maryland from 2016 until last year. So I was there for 4 years in the Department of Biology. And currently I'm a AAAS Congressional Science and Technology Policy Fellow working in the US Senate. And I'm sponsored by the American Statistical Association. And I very much have a windy path getting here. So I'll kind of start a little earlier, but I feel like there's a theme emerging that you might be detecting from some of us, that there's kind of, not a linear path, and that's totally okay. But I would agree with Setsuko's recommendation to follow the things that interest you, because that is very much the way that I've approached my career. So I consider myself a bit of an unlikely scientist. I did not know any scientists growing up, and it wasn't until I was in college that I really had an epiphany moment of, actually, I really love animals, and I started to see people having that as a career when I was in college and was exposed to it. So I ended up following the dual track of humanities and sciences at that point, clearly bad at making decisions even in my younger days, but wanting to do everything instead of just like narrowing myself down to one thing. So as I was finishing up college, I really wanted to give back to society in some way, because I had been supported in college through scholarships and fellowships. And so I joined Teach for America. And as someone who had personally experienced the inequities of education, I wanted to try to make a dent in that cause. So I became a middle school science teacher and moved to Brooklyn, New York, and taught for 3 years. And that was a really pivotal moment, because it allowed me to, for the first time, communicate science. And I did that every day. And that was an experience that really never left me. I knew I eventually wanted to go to grad school to get a PhD and be the first in my family to achieve that level of education. And as I ended up getting a PhD in animal behavior. And while I was doing my PhD, I was simultaneously doing a lot of science communication, doing a lot of outreach, and trying to make, science accessible and inclusive, and committed to, diversity in science issues. And as I was finishing, everyone's PhD feels like a roller coaster. Like sometimes you love it, sometimes you hate it, sometimes you want to stay, sometimes you're definitely not staying. So I was no different in that sense. As things were wrapping up, I was starting to think about the next step and wasn't sure if I wanted to go the research route or full on commit to science communication stuff. But I ended up landing an amazing postdoc experience. And I can tell you a little bit about that process too. That ended up taking me down the research path a little longer than I expected. So I had narrowed down a few potential people that I would do research with. I wasn't committed either way to staying in research, but if I got a position doing something I loved, I was like very open to continuing in it. So I contacted a few different people and ended up contacting somebody who I decided that I would be willing to write an NSF postdoctoral fellowship application with. And I would highly recommend doing that in the year before your postdoc, because it gives you a good experience and exposure with the grant application process if you haven't been accustomed to doing that previously. But also, it was a good experience for me to reapply and have more success the following year. So not with the person I originally wrote that with, but backing up. So I had talked to a few folks. I ended up talking to somebody who, when I had a conversation with her, she realized actually that a lot of my research interests aligned more with her former postdoc, who was now a brand new professor at the University of Maryland. So I contacted who became my postdoc advisor, thinking I was talking to her about her postdoc advisor, that I was going to get a job with her. But then we realized in our conversation with each other that we actually really, really clicked well, and we were the ones who had the research interests that were aligned. And she told me in one of the conversations, like, I don't mean to steal a postdoc from my old, mentor, but would you want to potentially work with me? And I was like, yes. And she had some funding, and I had already applied for the NSF, but told her that I would be willing to do so for the following year. So I accepted that position, not knowing how my NSF position was, fellowship application that was currently in was going to turn out. And it turned out I didn't get it. So it was a great move. So I followed the money, made sure I had funding, and moved to the DC area. And little did I know, I thought I would be here for a year, but little did I know I'd end up in the postdoc for 4 years. I ended up applying for the NSF, getting a postdoctoral fellowship and extending for 2 more years. And then my advisor had another year of funding for me to continue. And throughout that time, actually, I'd started applying for faculty positions pretty much from the get-go, but only things that I felt I absolutely wanted to do. My strategy was, I don't want to just move anywhere for a job. Like, I want to actually like the place I'm living, which isn't necessarily something that academia can offer. And so I applied for things as they came up that I felt would be perfect for me, if I could get them. And I ended up, over the course of 4 years, I threw my hat in the ring every year for a position. I ended up getting a position, a teaching position, in my 3rd year of my postdoc. And it was a bit of a crisis of like, do I stay? Do I go? I still hadn't finished like writing my postdoc papers, and it just felt like it would have been very stressful, not knowing there was a pandemic coming, and the position was in New York City. And I mean, there was just so many things to consider for that, but I ended up turning it down, not having anything in hand, and thinking like, okay, I'm going to extend my postdoc 1 more year, stay here, and then figure out what I'm doing next. And all this time I've been in the DC area actually was a really pivotal experience too, because pretty much from the get-go of moving here, I immediately got plugged into the science policy network of people that I've become friends with over the years that have done AAAS fellowships. And I decided to throw my hat in the ring in the science policy world. And while all of these academic positions were not interested in interviewing me for research positions, AAAS loved my application and they wanted to like put me in the government somewhere. So I followed that and ended up landing a really amazing opportunity that I'm currently in. And I don't know what's coming next, but I feel like the one thing I would say for advice is follow the things you're passionate about, as Setsuko said, and gauge like, what is it about what you're doing right now that you love, and what is it about it that you hate? That'll help give you guidance into what it is that you kind of should be looking towards. And yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks to all of our panelists. That was wonderful. So now we're opening it up to Q&A. So we would encourage everybody to turn on your videos so that we feel like we're actually having a discussion as opposed to just a bunch of gray boxes. That would be helpful. And I don't think there's anything in the chat yet, so I'll just give y'all a minute to, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question if you're ready. I can also jump in, but I don't want to give you a chance.
Showing your video also reminds me that you're not the undergrads in the class I'm teaching this semester who never show their video.
Okay, well, so I guess this is more of like an observation from listening to y'all talk, and like maybe it can become a question. It seemed like, I guess I was really noticing moments where you felt like empowered as you were making decisions about your career. And I feel like a lot of people in grad school really feel disempowered. They're like, well, you know, like whatever job I can get, I'll take that. Like, just give me a job or whatever. And through like your networking, like Chris, like making the spreadsheet of your network. I've never heard anything like that. It sounds like a really useful exercise, but that really empowered, it's like you're making the choice about who you want to work with. You're not just taking whoever. And Kristin, you were just talking about, you know, you really had more than one interest, and you weren't like, it's like you're going to do what's best for you, and you're not necessarily committed to like doing what you're supposed to do or what somebody else told you to do. And Setsuko, you were really emphasizing following your heart, which is a certain kind of empowerment as well. So I guess would any of you like to expand on that, or have advice for students who maybe don't feel quite so empowered at this particular stage?
I would love to jump in on that. And thanks for asking that, Siobhan, or bringing that point up, the common thread here. You know, I completely remember the feeling of being disempowered and like not feeling like my skill set was potentially useful in other areas, not being sure. But I can assure you, as somebody who left academia last year, there is a whole big world waiting for you. And you are so, you know, so equipped for so many different jobs given your skill set. I just want to really highlight that. If you think, you know, it's helpful to talk to other people in different industries to get a sense of kind of what aspects of your PhD do you end up using every day. Like for me, working in the Senate, I'm the only scientist in my office, but you know, I'm constantly using the skill set of like being able to read really complex information and synthesize it and then like regurgitate it out in a more digestible and understandable way for people who don't have that background, right? So that's a skill set that you do every day that like you may not think is important, but not a lot of people have that skill set. And I just want to highlight, like, there are, you know, your training right now is really preparing you for a lot of things. And if there's any year that has taught us how much we need scientists in government, it is the past one, where people who are making decisions about policies do not have a science background or have a, you know, or have doctoral degrees in any field. So, you know, we need social scientists, we need scientists in government. And I would just put in a plug for, you know, knowing that your skill set is highly valued in other areas other than academia.
Yeah, feeling of empowerment is something I really needed to learn and unlearn the like hierarchy in academia that I internalized in me as I navigated my PhD years, because, you know, the system makes it such that you always need to ask for permission from your, you know, committee and such. So I was feeling like not a fully fleshed adult, you know, I couldn't like do anything on my own term. But postdoc year really helped me to like come to terms with the fact that I am actually independent scholar of my own terms, and I'm qualified with what I do, and people appreciate what I have to offer. So that was like an unlearning process. But everything started, well, that kind of reckoning happened when I applied for this postdoc position. Before that, I had this idea about how the application should be, like what kind of like political, footings I should be mindful about. So I was kind of performing what I believed was the best foot forward, because I was submerged with this like Twitter space and how people talk about, the job market is really hard and such and such. But just because I was really desperate for this position, I decided to speak my mind. And I got accepted for that with my advocacy work and the scholarship that I'm really passionate about. And that felt very affirming. And I think in the long run, it made the situation very sustainable, because they accepted me for who I am as a scholar. So that is also something I used for the different applications, which got me the tenure track position. So yeah.
So just to add a little bit to what Setsuko said, just to amplify some of that, I think what much more autonomy about yourself is so true. Like you go into this new lab or this new situation and you don't really know anyone, but then suddenly people start asking you questions that you know the answer to. And like during your PhD, you're like, I don't know anything. And you're just like trying to learn. And then all of a sudden during your postdoc, like you're in a new lab, you're in a new situation, and you know things that people don't know around you. And it's a really empowering feeling, that certainly was a feeling that I felt when I was, time for me to be applying to, faculty positions in earnest. And even then, when I was looking at postdocs, my mentor's main focus was like, okay, Chris, what do you want to put in your tenure package? Like, what do you want if you're going to be tenure track? What goes in your tenure package? And then what skills do you need to get there? And when you get tenure, like theoretically, that's the university telling you, you are an independent learner, like you are an independent researcher and you have everything you need to be a professor. So thinking along those lines early and using like writing a postdoc grant or something like that as a way to think about that is so helpful.
Somebody has their hand raised. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, my name is Chinyere Edward. I'm joining in from Nigeria. It's evening out here, so I'll just say good evening to everyone. I'm really excited to be in this group. My questions basically are just on the basis to help me make some career decisions. So I just got admitted into the Robert Smith Business School for fall of 2021. So I'm just at the visa process. But again, I do know that I've got my eyes on going for a PhD right after my MBA. So my question will be, what opportunities, like, for an international student who wants to move from straight out of MBA straight to a PhD, what opportunities are there for international students within the US and outside the US? If you really don't want to go into academia, what other areas can you begin to look at and explore in terms of growing your career? Yeah, thank you.
Can you repeat what your field is in? What aspect of your PhD? What PhD programs would you want to be jumping into?
So all my career life has always been in human resource. So I'm looking at things around organizational behavior, psychology, things within that area. I just want to leverage on my experience. I really don't want to go outside what I've done in my career. So it has to be anything that has to do with organizational behavior, managerial psychology, anything behavioral, yeah.
So as a fellow international scholar, I think masters and PhDs opens different kinds of doors. And I don't think it's too late for you to figure out whether the PhD is for you or not during your masters. It sounds like you're already thinking about the possibility, so you can test the water and figure out what might be good for you. I did my master's in information science before coming to UMD, and that was a terminal degree in like library science space. So my friends graduated with a master's, and that's the final degree that their field required. During that program, I found that that was like half liberal arts and half business school type of program that I was in. And given I was such a humanist and I couldn't really grapple with the business side of things, where I was advised to design a company to make it collapse in 5 years to make the most money. Like I couldn't really sign on to it. And I figured I needed more training in humanities. And that's how I enrolled or applied for the PhD to kind of hone in on my like critical eyes so that I know that what kind of questions I want to be asking. So that's my take.
So I will say one thing I learned from Susan or Blessing's workshop is really you can start looking for like a job posting. So a lot of the job posting actually give you a sense of what the industry or what kind of organization are asking for in terms of skills or expertise or experience. So if you feel like, if you see the job posting has more like PhD required or etc., then I would definitely encourage you to go to the PhD route. But if the position that attract you more is more having the business development side or more human resource side, then you can probably reconsider, is that the route, is PhD the route you want to take, or you can just run with the business. So I'll have to say, like, I think in industry there are a lot of opportunity that can use for MBA and master degrees. So I definitely will encourage you to kind of just explore the industry territory or options.
And I would just add, this might be a wildly controversial statement, but like, I personally saw getting a PhD as a win-win, regardless of whether I stayed in academia or not. Like, I didn't really ever know which way I'd want to go, but it opens that opportunity for sure. But it also opens up a lot of other doors too. And like the others have said, like, you may not need a PhD to achieve the thing that you want to do, but having more information under your belt as you pursue your MBA should be helpful. If you decide to pursue a PhD at that point, one thing that I would suggest asking as you're interviewing with different schools is to say, well, what have former graduates gone on to do? Like, what does this program lead to down the line? And they should be able to answer that for you. So that hopefully would be helpful. I just want to also put a plug in for grad students on the call, currently grad students who aren't sure about pursuing a postdoc even. I think a postdoc can be approached the same way. And personally, the postdoc is an opportunity to, you should ideally gain a new skill set so that you're not like the smartest person in the room, but you obviously will feel more empowered, but you can hopefully gain something from it as well. And for me, I saw a lot of different potential pathways of careers that wouldn't be necessarily open to me without a postdoc. So I saw that as a win-win too, of like, jumping in for a year or two, strengthening my research skill set, and then moving on from there. And I didn't regret either the PhD or the 4-year postdoc. They both were helpful tools for moving forward.
Thank you, guys. That was helpful.
Good luck in your process.
I have another question, but I'll wait a moment and see if anybody else from the audience wants to raise their hand. I wanted to return to the theme of networking because it's like useful for everybody no matter what. And I think a lot of grad students have a feeling, well, networking is something that you do, like if you're going to go into industry or whatever, like then you have to like network. But like in academia, we don't have to worry about networking. But like, of course, that's wildly untrue. And I really wrote it down when Setsuko said academia is a network at the end of the day. It's just people. And wherever you have groups of people trying to work together, like networking is an important thing you're going to have to do. And so I was wondering if y'all could talk a little bit more about what you did while you were a grad student or during your postdoc to try to expand your network beyond, you know, the people that were already around you, your advisors and your fellow students.
I can start with this. So as I was doing my postdoc, I think I started to look for outside network really, because I think I started to realize academia is not the route I would like to go. So I started to, I see blessing coming in. I definitely go into a lot of postdoc or PhD students workshop to really expand network. And as well as I joined a local networking group. It's called Women in Bio. So that has a lot of different women in different type of industry, in academia, in industry, etc. Really just kind of help me to expand. And another thing is that kind of creates some accountability. So for example, we have like a New Year's resolution. I was just thinking, okay, I'm gonna do like 20 informational interview this year, and then people will ask you, okay, how many have you done this year? Like, so that kind of creates some accountability to kind of monitor you or help you on track. That's I think Kristin and many people has touched on the peer kind of mentoring. Those are important and very helpful. So, yeah.
So the sort of things that I've done, so for one, I'm really envious that Maryland had so many opportunities for postdocs, targeted to postdocs at UConn. There was literally no postdoc community. There was no postdoc specific anything. There were about 100 postdocs at UConn total at the university. So I sort of was on my own for deciding what my future was going to be. I mean, what you'll hear within academia, someone who wanted to stay there, of course, is go to conferences, show up at conferences, talk to people at conferences. One thing that I got better at just before the pandemic stopped was just emailing, looking through the list of conference attendees, rather than just like having an agenda of like, you must network with people. Instead, it's like, okay, I looked through the list of attendees. I found someone doing interesting research and I sent them an email directly. And I was like, hey, could we meet up sometime for coffee or something like that? That's, I think, a really good way to network, is just be more directed. Don't push yourself to be like, I'm in this room and I need to find the right person. Like, actually just email someone directly, and probably they'll be looking for something to do other than stare at posters all day and with this sort of vacant expression. The other thing to do is professional organizations within academic fields sometimes have things like trainings. So I actually met someone, a senior faculty member here at UB, at one of those. She was a mentor in that program. She wasn't the mentor who was assigned to me, interestingly, but I was interested in shifting my research more in her direction. We ended up talking some more. And that might be some of the reason why, I'm here at UB now, is that I had talked to her, I had gotten her advice at this other organization. And again, it's because I saw her name on the list and was like, I want to move in that direction. Let me email that person. But that's one thing to do, and might make it seem a little less intimidating than I need to find someone who's important to me. Is, well, you know what papers you're reading, and so you can look through names at conferences or workshops or things like that and seek them out beforehand, so then you can make some plans and organize that before you even step foot in the location where the conference is.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I mean, I consider myself a people person, so I like talking to a lot of different people all the time, which I did at conferences, and I created a network of people around me that kind of were interested in different things, starting from grad school, really. But it was never directed or like it never felt like I am just talking to this person so I can get ahead in my career. You know, like that was just not the way I approach things. It was more like, what do you do? What are you about? What do you value? Tell me about your job. Like, just like, I'm curious to know who you are. And like, that helps you figure out what your interests are too. You know, I will say the UMD area is super, you know, the position, like where you're located is so lucky because there are so many, you know, there's a huge city right next to you that's full of government and federal positions that are potentially open to you for a career. And if you have any ins into that network, I would highly recommend just like meeting folks that are not, if you're interested in leaving academia, especially, like that's a great way to kind of get in. There are different ways to get involved. For me, I had met AAAS fellow science policy people through mutual friends from grad school that had moved and all converged in DC. So I immediately got plugged into that group of people, never once thinking I would ever myself go into science policy. It was kind of just like, you know, I just got to know them all and really enjoyed hanging out with them, and like they're ambitious and want to change society in positive ways. So we had a lot in common, and you know, that's ended up being helpful as I've moved into science policy, but it was certainly not something that I had in mind at the time. But just having a broad network can be really helpful. One thing I will definitely say is that until leaving academia, I did not realize how much LinkedIn is used for everyone except academics. Like for whatever reason, like I tried looking up all the people I knew in academia, and no people had like the most pitiful profiles or didn't have one at all. That is not what the world looks like outside of academia. So if you're interested in meeting people and figuring out like, what do people do and what kind of jobs am I interested in, LinkedIn is a great place to like, you know, go down the rabbit hole and start building a profile for yourself. Start like trying to figure out like, how do you explain who you are and what you're interested in? And that's a really great way to meet people that may not necessarily be accessible to you, especially in today's day and age where everything's virtual anyways. Like it's a great way to just reach out to somebody with a cool job and be like, hey, would you want to have a coffee? I want to hear about your, like, you know, what you do. And that's a really great way to just like build a network generally, I think. So putting a plug in for LinkedIn.
I just want to echo part of what you said, because I just feel like I have to tell students this every single day, that like networking is not some like crass thing where you're trying to use people for a job. It literally is just being curious and interested about other people. And when you are curious and interested, they will eventually become curious and interested about you, and you will have a human relationship, which is all that networking is. It's just relationships.
Right. There's something about that. It sounds like an icky word. We need a new term for it, but it's really just like, it's just like community building, you know, it's just like creating a space of people that do different things than you so that you can get a sense of, so you can, growing your community.
We are almost out of time. And so Simone is telling me that if we can get as many people as possible to turn on their cameras so that they can take a screenshot to like record this moment. This is like the equivalent of the group picture that we would have if we were doing this in person. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that. And meanwhile, I'm gonna put a link in the chat, which is for a little evaluation survey for this session. And I'm also supposed to remind you that there's going to be a survey sent about the whole event, and you will be entered into a drawing for some prizes if you help out with that, so please do that. And I would also make one more plug for DocNet, which you heard about in the intro session, but it's a way that you could get in touch with some Maryland PhD alumni who might be able to help you with your network. Okay, Simone, did you take our picture? Should we all smile?
I was gonna say, could everyone smile? If you have your camera on, take a moment to smile. Everyone looks really beautiful. Thank you so much. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Everyone looks wonderful and awake, well rested.
All right, so thanks again, everybody. There's another session of panels coming up next, and I believe Chris is going to be at one of the Ask Anything events later. So if you would like to talk more with him, you will have an opportunity, and you can find that stuff. I'll put the link to the event guide again in the chat in case you like need to find that before you go to your next thing.
Yep, I should be there at 3:30 or 3:45, whatever time it is.
I
It's in
will
my
be there also. I'll see you then.
Great. Okay, great.
Thanks so much.
All right.
For being nice
Thanks,
to
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
See ya. See you, Chris.